Hey friends, when people ask me my favorite exercise, I usually say it's walking, but it's not for the reasons usually mentioned, and I'm just gonna walk while I explain and talk. It's true that walking has come into popularity recently, and a lot of people do use it for weight loss or general fitness, and I personally know several friends who do their 10,000 steps a day and they stay in great shape, seemingly year-round. And while that's great, I would say walking also has the benefit of being indirectly responsible for a lot of great decisions I've made in my life, and a lot of the best decisions I've made, including the decision to start hybrid calisthenics, which is the reason I'm making this video and the reason some of you might already know me. And the reason for this is because walking works kind of like a planning phase in my life. So you think when we wake up in the morning, we often are reacting to something. So we check our phones, we look at the TV, we listen to the radio. Do people still listen to the radio? And while that is a valuable part of life, we're often just reacting to the information and the stimulus given. And walking and just having a planning phase gives me a moment to collect my thoughts and decide, what do I want to do? And something that might supplement that is walking has been shown to improve your mental health, and walking in nature, especially if you have the opportunity to do that, can help reduce stress and anxiety, which is pretty cool. See, our life in many ways can be thought of as a journey or a series of journeys. You can also think of it as a project. And like any journey, you have to do at least two things. You have to decide where you want to go, but then you have to go there. But there's a very important third step, and not just because I like things in threes, though I do, and that is to realign and adjust after we learn more. See, it's pretty rare that we go just in one direction, one straight direction everywhere. Most journeys, metaphorical or literal, have many segments or stops along the way. And during these stops, we can examine the distance we've traveled so far and decide if we still want to go to the same place. And if you want a literal example, let's say you're on a road trip and you take a break at a rest stop and you think, traffic along this route is actually more congested than we thought. Maybe we'll take a different direction and go around, which is farther, but we'll get there faster as a result. Alternatively, you might think, we're making better time than we realized. Why don't we take the scenic route? We can enjoy that a little bit more. And as a more metaphorical example, you can think of a good team in almost anything. Anything from companies to sports teams, they usually have a team working on a project, and that team will meet regularly in order to stay aligned. And this is important so you don't have people going off in different directions for one thing, but you can also evaluate the progress you've made so far. If you're doing marketing, how is that going so far? Is it performing worse than expected, better than expected, or as we expected? And as a result, you can make changes as needed. Walking and other comparable activities can be like a daily meeting with yourself. And your life is probably more complicated than most single projects out there. So it can be pretty important. And the process is pretty simple because a meeting is basically a conversation. And like many great conversations, you can start by asking yourself how it's going. By the way, I know pretty much this entire video has been backlit, but I like the river and this is sometimes where I actually walk. And for me, I start by examining the personal projects and the personal journeys that I've been on. And if you're alive and watching this, you probably have multiple personal journeys that you're on. Even if the goal is just to continue to stay alive, which if you're watching this video, you're succeeding at. So congratulations. And after I see how those personal journeys and personal projects are going, I ask myself if there's anything I change and if it's still something I want to do. So an example of this that many of us go through at some point in our lives is dating. And if you're seeing someone, you might ask yourself, how's that going? Do I still want to be with them? This is usually something you ask early on, seeing someone, not 20 years into marriage, for example. And if you're not seeing someone, do you want to? Is that something that you want to pursue at this stage in your life? And the answer might be no. These aren't meant to be stressful questions. These are just more like things to invoke your curiosity, like a casual question from a friend. If they really stress you out, you can write it down and come back to it later. Another example is work. Most of us work at some point in our lives, and there's usually some kind of progression or journey within that work. So you might get promoted or demoted, hopefully promoted. Depending on your line of work, you might change positions, you might get a raise and make more money, and climb the corporate ladder if that's something you want to do. And you can just progress in your career, and you can ask yourself, how is that going? Do I still like what I do? Not based on a single day, by the way, not based on a single week, month, or even year. Overall, how am I feeling about what I'm doing? And we can apply the same thing to our friendships, even. The people we hang around. Do we still like them? Do they encourage us to be better? How do we feel about certain interactions? Is there anything that we can do for them to make them happy, especially if we like them? And if you're following along, you might realize that a lot of these questions, the answer is more neutral, or I'm not sure, or I think it's all right. And a lot of times it's, I'm not sure, I'm gonna wait until I know more, which is perfectly fine, normal, and even good. We probably shouldn't make major changes to our life every day. That would seem crazy. But the purpose of this is every once in a while, especially if you don't do major planning every day, which is okay, every once in a while you realize, I have increasingly and steadily not been happy with this one aspect in my life. Let's say it's your career. So you might realize if you do this regularly that you've taken a temporary job, or you took a temporary job, and that was 7 years ago. 7 years have passed since you said you would take this temporary job while you pursued your actual passion, while you set yourself up and got the education and the skills and prerequisites to work the job you actually want. But that journey kind of stalled a year into that. It doesn't really have to be a result of something you did at all. You could have moved or had to take a step back to help family or friends. Maybe you were dealing with some health issues. But over time, you might realize that if you aren't happy with this current path that you're on, this current trajectory, and you think you do want to make a change, you don't have to panic, but you might realize at some level that you want to make a change here. And then you can start considering, well, what would be my next steps? What are my current options? What would I like to do? And what would I like to see as a result of that? So if you're changing careers, which is often a pretty major step to take, you might think about, well, where you would want to work, and if you would need further education to get that, which is especially important for certain fields that require certification or license. But not always, and sometimes self-teaching or learning from a mentor is an option, like fitness, art, music, depending on what you want to do. Now, a lot of this is easier said than done, of course. We're talking about major changes to your life, which usually don't happen overnight, but it can be a process. You might first start noticing some things like, I might want to change my job. And then a month or 2 months in, you might realize you actually don't. So as you can see, it can fluctuate. However, some things will build up over time, and you might have slight discomfort at first, a slight inkling for change. And over time, you will reach a certain step where you realize you definitely do want to make a change. And then you will start looking for opportunities, which is wonderful because when you start thinking about that, I'm not saying anything magical happens, but when you align yourself with a goal, when you realize you want to make a change, it does seem like more opportunities present themselves to you. It's like when you learn a new word and then you suddenly see that new word everywhere. It's not necessarily because something magically changed, but now you're looking for something, you know what to look for, and especially when it comes to opportunities, you know that you can act on them. If you want to make a career change and your friend tells you about moving to this new city and this wonderful new job she has, sounds like it could be promising. Or if you recognize that you're at a place in your life where you want to start seeing someone, not necessarily anyone, someone special, or even just want more friends, the way you approach personal interaction with other people might be different. You'll start to be in a mental state more open to friendships and relationships. Or a friend could introduce you. That's always great. The friends in my examples are very good friends. We're lucky if we have friends like that. But you see why this is important, because in almost every major endeavor, you usually have multiple people working on it. So to simplify it, you might have a manager and a worker, and the manager might decide what to do, and the worker does it. Again, there's usually more to it than that. Ideally, the manager would be very good at planning, which is work in itself, and the worker would be very good at their skill. But in life, you see that we have to be multiple members, all the members, and we have to play both roles. We have to consistently decide where we want to go, and then we have to try to go there. And we realign based on what we see and what we experience. This helps us avoid the trap of being so stuck in our day-to-day life, which I completely understand. When life is stressful and you're doing the same thing every day, and you're tired, you're not getting enough rest, you're not getting adequate nutrition, you're not exercising enough, even though you know you should, you're not spending time with family, you're not spending time with friends. Life can be brutal that way. I know. But if and when we get a chance, we want to try to take a step away from doing and a step towards planning. We don't want to be so busy traveling our journey that we don't realize our ideal destination may have changed. And even though we're working hard, we might be headed in the opposite direction of where we actually want to go. But we can try to avoid all of that by regularly planning, talking with ourselves, and realigning. Not everyone likes to walk. I understand, it's not for everyone. But regardless of how you do it, I recommend keeping a planning phase in your life so you can make sure you're making progress towards the things that you want to do and the things that you were meant to do. Have a beautiful day.